Hi, my name is Gary Burchett, and you're listening to Just Barton.
Hey guys, welcome back to Just Baate. My name is Aswin. Now, I usually do have Praatibh alongside with me, but he's got a stomach bug and he couldn't make it as excited as he was, to be honest. But we got to keep the episode rolling, so here we are. Now, before I introduce the guest, I feel like we're connecting the dots because we have had sports broadcasters on our show. So they speak in front of the camera and they go about their business. We have had a radio jockey on our show who also recently actually hosted a couple of shows for Star Sports. Disha Oberoi, if you don't know who I'm talking about. Yeah, but we listen to her over the radio and we go about our business. But here's a man who is a major part of the behind the scenes production. Now, if it weren't for him, we wouldn't see the live broadcast the way it is. It's because of him we have Select Dugout on Star Sports, and man, am I so grateful for that. But apart from that, he's been part of the production team for 4 major Grand Slams in tennis. So he's been part of US Open, he's been part of the Wimbledon. He's won the best sports coverage award given by the Australian Sports Commission for the Big Bash. He's been part of the IPL. He's been part of so many World Cups. He's been part of the FIFA qualifiers and he's now the head editorial for cricket in Star Sports. Gary, if I could go on about the progress and achievements you have made, I think we would have had a whole episode in itself. But thank you so much for coming in.
Wow, what an introduction. I mean, just going through all those accolades makes me feel like I need a pay rise. But it's a pleasure, Ashwin, to join you on this podcast. And sympathies, Praatibh, get better.
Yeah.
I'm hoping that by watching this back, your health will improve. But
Yeah,
a pleasure to be in your company.
Thank you so much. And yeah, he was very excited. Now, before we get into the episode itself and I ask you a barrage of questions and pick your brains on things, being an Australian yourself, they just won the T20 World Cup. Their first T20 World Cup. So how was that? And you were behind the scenes watching that. So how did that go?
Yeah, I mean, I have mixed allegiances. I've been living in Mumbai since February 2019. I have a great affection for this country and this city. My wife and my 2 daughters, live and reside and are educated here. We've been through the entire pandemic, which has strengthened our affection and relationship for India. And being an Australian, I'm very loyal when it comes to our cricket. I love watching Australia win World Cups, and thankfully I've seen us win a lot of silverware over the years. But when you assume the role of head of cricket for a network like Star, my allegiances then very much turn blue. And so wanting India who doesn't want India to do well? And particularly if you're working at an organization that is very much about, glorifying and celebrating Indian success. So, and being the selfish producer that I am, we want eyeballs. And when India does well, more people tune into screens to watch India's success. So look, I was very delighted as an Australian to see them win the World Cup. It reinforces the strength in Australian cricket. But I was disappointed that India couldn't get to the Final 4. I think if they could have somehow supplanted New Zealand, that would have been a great quartet.
That's true, yeah. We were very disappointed that India didn't make it. I think after that, we dropped the whole cricket segment on our podcast. But anyway, now talking about you, before we get into what you do right now, as a 15-year-old, as a 10-year-old, what did you think you wanted to do? And then how did you get into the field of production or journalism or reporting, as I call it?
So in 1986, I saw Top Gun at the cinema.
Right.
I was a 12-year-old at the time, and I went, "Oh, that's it. I'm going to be a fighter pilot. I'm going to fly F-18 Hornets for the Royal Australian Air Force." Foolishly, I was, and I have been an asthmatic. And when I went to have a chat with one of the recruitment officers at the Australian Defence Force, the guy just said, "Mate, you're an asthmatic. You got no chance of flying."
Of course.
I was crestfallen. So I needed another career vocation. And then for some reason, like every young kid at some point, and I want to be an actor. I want to entertain people. So for quite a while, and then I managed to do a bit of theatre whilst I was studying, and toured Australia with the Australian Theatre for Young People, and that sort of galvanised my thinking that you know what, I actually do like the idea of bringing joy to people's lives. Right. But that's another story in itself. So I didn't set out to be a sports broadcaster. Having said that, in my final year of studies, in the yearbook, the question was asked, "Where do you see yourself in 10 years' time?" And I said, writing for Sports Illustrated, and having a gold American Express card.
And did you get
so there was something within that if I wasn't going to be a cricketer, or I wasn't going to be an athlete, then being a sports broadcaster or a journalist was going to be the next best thing.
Wow, and you made it. I mean, making it is an understatement, but you're here. But were you someone who played a lot of sports when you were a child, when you were a kid?
Yeah, I mean, as a young Australian growing up, we're an outdoor nation. You're encouraged. Every weekend I was either doing little athletics. I was a long jumper and triple jumper. Could run a bit. I played cricket from the age of 8.
Yes.
And then played representative cricket. Played cricket in England for 5 years. So sport has been something that is, a constant in my life, and continues to be. I'm, and I love the stories. I love it. It's theatre in the round. It just throws up a myriad of personalities and subplots and undercurrents, which you can't replicate in any other field.
That's fantastic. And I have a lot of questions based on that. But before we get into it, like I was saying during the introduction, you've been part of a lot of sporting events and one of the biggest in the world. When was it when you realized that, right, I've made it? Or when you thought to yourself, right, now I may not be a big deal, but I made it in the world of sports production?
I think it was after in 2011. So I was appointed the role as executive producer of cricket at Fox Sports Australia in 2009, having produced football for a number of years. And I had a meeting with Cricket Australia in 2010, and they said, look, we're going to roll out this new tournament. It's going to be franchise based, and Fox, you're the custodians of domestic cricket. Here's a blank canvas. What would you do with a T20 game? And as a producer, there's nothing more you want to hear than blank canvas. What can your imagination come up with, and how can we execute it? So that gave us, I'm boldly proclaimed that we did change the face of T20 cricket. We put helmets in umpires' caps.
Definitely, yeah.
We mic'd up Shane Warne, who'd called ball by ball, in that famous Brendan McCullum dismissal. We were the first tournament to introduce the flashing zing bails. We modified our whole graphics package to be more youthful and to represent the way that the T20 game was played. We put cameras in batsmen's helmets. We wanted to make sure that viewers got the most intimate and personal experience of the way cricket is viewed, and I'm really proud of that at Achievement. And a lot of those innovations, are very, very prominent in T20 coverage today. So that was a moment when I thought I'd actually done something that was of real value to the viewer.
When I was reading about you and I came across the Shane Warne, the mic, you gave that example on your LinkedIn too. I was so surprised because I love that video of him calling the Brendan McCullum wicket. And man, that was some ball.
And you know why it worked? You know why that moment worked? Because that was a little episode in sports psychology. The viewers knew something before McCullum did. Right?
Right. Oh, right.
So Warne said to Brendan Julian, I'm going to, he's probably going to play the sweep here, so I'm going to try and go around his legs. And then, the rest is history. So the viewer was then treated to a moment where Shane had built the anticipation and said, watch what happens next. And he called it. You're not going to get it every time. But that's, to me, that was the golden nugget.
And this is a great segue to my next question. Like you said, a lot of what you did reinvented the way we see T20 cricket now. And like you also said, there's nothing better than a black canvas. So what is your creative process? Like, how do you think of coming up with ideas? Is it you as a viewer, or depending on what sports is it, or how many viewers the sport itself has? So what's your creative process like?
It's a really good question. There is not one singular way in which a creative process is undertaken. But I always come from the position of the viewer. And this has been one of the challenges, but a beautiful challenge in many ways, of working in India, because Australian audiences, have different tastes and requirements and needs, and Indian audiences, and you're like 30 odd different states in one country. You have, your customary and cultural beliefs are so varied and wide. So, but I always come from the position of what does the viewer want and what does the viewer need, and how can I bolster and enhance the viewer experience? So in respect to BBL, I wanted to take them closer to the game than ever before. Right now, I'm starting to think that, we're a shorter form society. Longer form is tough to process. And so I'm now starting to think more about symbolism. How do we use icons and a pictorial approach? So people have to think less, but feel more.
When you talk about the whole idea of pictorial presentation and using icons as for us, for the viewers itself. How do you go about that? So how do you know this works but this doesn't? Because you can't really have a trial and error process on live television, right? Or do you have a trial and error process on live television? So how do you go about implementing that action, coming up with the idea and implementing it, and knowing that it might work or it may not work at all?
I think I'm very fortunate that I have one of the most incredible production teams at the Star Sports Network. You know, when I first came into the Star Sports offices in 2018 as a contractor, I could not believe the cricket wisdom and cricket passion that existed in these floors. And I knew Indians loved their cricket, but I just didn't know to what extent. And they don't just love Indian cricket, Indian domestic cricket. My colleagues know scorecards and series and results and personalities the world over.
Right. Yeah.
You know, they sometimes know more about my own domestic cricket season and achievements in Australia than I do. So we road test a lot of the ideas amongst, you know, our production personnel. And you're right. You know, sometimes you have to take a gamble. Sometimes these things don't work.
Right.
Sometimes you come up with a creative concept and it just falls a little bit short. You know, it could be, you know, a VR, you know, virtual reality or augmented reality exercise that you think has got great purchase, but the viewer just doesn't get anything out of it. You know, and we did something very similar with the dugout. You know, we tried a new format. All right, and that was my first assignment at the Star Network, to basically come up with a feed that was designed for the cricket purist, that would take, again, the viewer inside the game in a highly nuanced and highly technical and analytical approach that hadn't been done before. And, you know, the risks with doing something like the dugout were vast. But as you kindly mentioned in your intro, it actually has proven to be a really, really popular and, you know, successful format.
Love the dugout, but they love it. Praatibh and I watch that all the time because I think it's the best thing. I mean, I don't want to say it's the best thing Star Sports come up with because you're right here, but it's one of the best thing Star Sports has come up with.